Hey everybody. Hey everybody, it's Joe Trippi and welcome back to That Trippi Show and our special guest episode. God, I screwed that all up. Hey everybody, it's Joe Trippi and welcome back to a special guest episode of That Trippi Show. Today we welcome an old friend, Nicholas Gruen. We met after the Dean campaign in Australia. And I got to tell you, it was great to be in your country, Nicholas. And but what was more interesting to me was how we connected, not just sort of around, you wanted to understand better how the Dean campaign had been able to mobilize people and get them to come together the way we did. But also I was fascinated with an idea that you had about how we could make democracy more vibrant, how we could find ourselves. Let me try that again. Nicholas, I was interested, Nicholas, you were interested in how we brought people together in the Dean campaign and, my ideas about technology and how we could use it to build a stronger democracy. But I was really intrigued back then, and this was right after the Dean campaign, about your idea about how to make people communicate, give them the opportunity to communicate and exchange ideas, and how that would make democracy much more vibrant. And now we find ourselves in this battle in America. I want our listeners to hear your thoughts, because I've thought for almost better part of a decade and a half now that you were onto something. But now I'm sort of concerned because we're in this short-term, gotta have, the polarization that's out there can't be fought in 8 months in a way that would make a difference. So I wanted you to first of all, welcome to the show. And second of all, why don't you lay out your ideas about how to bridge the gap and fight the partisanship long term?
Okay. Well, I guess I started thinking about this. We had a right-wing ignorant candidate in the late 90s, and there were two so she was on my mind. Her name's Pauline Hanson. She's still going. And Australia's Prime Minister was trying to make us a republic, which really didn't mean much other than getting rid of the Monty Python show at the top of the Constitution and replacing it with a stuffed shirt. And people were getting very excited about this. And I just thought to myself, Pauline Hanson is an important thing to think about, and the atmospherics, the symbolism of Australia, whether we're a republic or whether we're a republic with a foreign Monty Python show or whether we're our own republic, really doesn't matter. But I saw the populism of Pauline Hanson as, I saw it as legit, as a sort of toxified thing, as something which was toxified but otherwise legitimate, which is that a whole lot of not very well educated people were feeling thoroughly left out and talked over and yelled at and called racist and all the rest of it. And that needed to be represented in our democracy. And I thought to myself, why don't we could have a citizens' assembly which is chosen in the same way juries are chosen. And the more I thought about that, the more I saw it, not as just a sort of a new trick or a particular thing we could do that could help, but as actually a lens through which to look at democracy, our own democracy, and what's wrong with it. And pretty much everything about it is curative of the terrible things that our democracy, the terrible state of our democracy. So then the question becomes, how do you bring this into the political mainstream in some way? And lots of the people who are writing about this and talking about this want it to somehow replace our existing institutions. And that's obviously impossible in the short term. And I don't even know if it's a good idea in the long term. What I know is a good idea is the American idea of checks and balances, And we have to introduce mechanisms like this: citizen juries, ordinary people, everyday people, sampled from the community, got together, and we say, what do you think?
Right. So it's literally randomly putting people officially, I mean, selected to debate, discuss, talk together over the problems, and see if they can work on and come out with solutions.
Yes, but you said the word officially. Now, as you know, Joe, I've said to you every now and again, usually at a time in your crisis-ridden country, which is a bit too late, why don't we have a community-funded version of this? So if you go, right. So for instance, I spent a bit of time, I mentioned it to you, it turned out not to work really because of COVID, but one of the ideas I had was to try to get some wealthy people, initially wealthy people, after which I think when people saw this, it could be crowdfunded, to fund a citizen assembly to depute a people's delegation to Glasgow, to the COP, to the Conference of the Parties on Greenhouse, from the two then recalcitrant countries, which were Australia and the United States. Well, Biden got up and so on and so forth. So that gives you an idea of something that, so there are quite a lot of people talking about sortition, but in my opinion, they're political neophytes, and they're not really trying to turn this into a form of political activism. Now, I realize that it's difficult, but that's what I'm trying to do.
Right. Well, it's difficult in the political season, particularly as at least in the United States, our democracy is so polarized and people are in their tribes right now. What interests me about the idea is it can lift people above the tribe to come together. It's like I know that I've been in the room with Republicans, and you can, as a Democrat, and I'm convinced that I could, that I could sit down with some of them, with any of them actually,
exactly,
with 3 or 4 others, and we could have a discussion. I'm not going to get everything I want; they're not going to get everything they want, but I think we would be able to come to some agreement. Maybe we both leave the room wishing we could get more.
Yeah. Well, this is in our DNA, Joe. We evolved. We would have been eaten by lions and run through by various animals on the African savannah if we didn't evolve to be the only primate that solves problems in groups. That's what we do, and we're incredibly good at it. And when you get everyday people together, I'll take you through the psychology of what happens when these citizen juries are put on. People go along and they think, oh, politics, people going to be yelling at me. And they go in and they meet these other people who are thinking the same thing. And they don't meet people who agree with them, but they think, oh, okay, so that's why you think that about guns or whatever. And they either think, oh, yeah, well, that makes some sense for you, or they think, well, you're a bit crazy, but we've got to live together anyway, so how are we going to deal with this? And away it goes. Things work out, and they go home. And if you do a sort of an analysis of people's experience of this, 95% of people describe it as a good experience. Half of those describe it as a very good experience. About half of those describe it in quite rapturous terms, and half of those go and stand at the next election for local council or something. Well, so it's an incredibly generative process that speaks to our nature, to the way we evolved.
Right, and if you ran this in communities around the country, group after group out there getting together, actually talking through some of the issues, was just so for the audience. Generally, what happens here in my relationship with Nicholas is I fall off the map, getting involved in something like Doug Jones in Alabama. I'm getting emails from him saying, I have an idea about how we could finally try to implement this. And then usually I come up for air just before the next crisis hits. That makes it untimely. And so, no. And so I've always been intrigued with this idea, but I still am troubled by the timing again. I mean, again, I don't see how this can happen in a meaningful way. I'm not saying it can't be started now, but in a meaningful way between now and our November election.
So let me suggest that there will be, now I'm not sure I'll be able to think of the right examples, but for instance, during the Trump era, sending a people's, the COP, the Glasgow business, the meeting of the parties on greenhouse got delayed and so on. But there are, I mean, imagine if, so you just take me through this thought experiment, Joe. You and some respectable Republican and some figure put together a group of 150 everyday Americans, and they are paid to stand as a standing citizens chamber. That's their job. Would that be good for American politics or bad for American politics? Would Joe Manchin's votes be any different if that body existed? I think there are all kinds of circumstances where a body like that could have an effect, an ongoing effect right now. And over time, as people saw it work, they would say, in the words of that scene in When Harry Met Sally, I'll have what she's having. They would say, that looks like a good idea. Can we please have this at least in an advisory capacity in our constitutions? So those are the sorts of things that we might be able to do.
Well, I mean, I see that could happen like over something like climate change, a citizens council now coming
not just on climate change. Let's say Donald Trump gets elected in 2 years' time, or 2 and a bit years' time. This isn't necessarily, I think you'd have to do a whole lot of other things because God knows what's going to go on. Right. But if you have a group of everyday Americans just saying, hang on a minute, he did what? Hang on a minute, showing the considered opinion of the American people, the considered opinion of people who are paid to check stuff out, know a bit about what's going on, not just say some nice things on TV and so on. Would it be a good thing to have or a bad thing to have? I think it would be a pretty good thing to have. Would it save the day? Probably not. You tell me something that we can do.
I just don't, at least where we are in the country right now, I don't think anybody, the Trump loyalist would see anything coming out of that group, even if there were Trump loyalists in it, and it didn't agree with
the really rusted on ones, yes. But there's always to get the sort of numbers that you need to become a president, even in the rotten system that you've got, you need quite a lot of people who, feel the psychology. They feel bad about people like Hillary Clinton, about establishment Democrats, all that stuff. And somehow they've got themselves into this psychological state of going with these lawless characters. Yeah. And if they see a good chunk of people just like them going, no, this makes no sense, these people are really just trying to rev us up, I think it can make a difference. I don't think it can do much harm, but I agree with you that it's a very sticky situation and no one thing is going to be a silver bullet in that situation.
Yeah, I would actually go further. If we had successfully done this 6 or 7 years ago, and there was such a citizens groups that got together and talked like this with each other, we very might not have. We might have headed off Donald Trump becoming president. I mean, it may have been very fruitful in that kind of time. I think my own view is that It may work after this next round of elections just because it's so polarizing. I just don't see. In other words, it's an idea that needs to be worked on. It's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show to talk about. But I think it's a long-term view.
Well, I agree.
That could make the difference if we can come out of this. I'm just not sure that we can come out of it. I don't see any way we come out of it, out of the polarized tribe, at war thing. We're going to go into this election doing that, and I don't see.
Yeah, well, I agree.
The one thing though, back then too, we had, I admit that I had you had a more dystopian view of technology, at least in terms of which this idea totally comes from, because you recognize that technology and information in our devices would mean we would not be talking to each other. We'd be isolated from each other.
Yeah.
And you had this idea about, no, it's if you do these citizen councils,
that's right.
Where at the local level, people are coming together in person, knowing each other as human beings, treating each other civilly and with dignity, that we would find more answers that way. I did say at the time, first of all, you were right about that. But secondly, I did say at the time, I know I could sound utopian, sort of having this, it's going to solve all our problems view. But I said really clearly, and in my book, I repeated it, and ever since, that technology doesn't know who's using it. The tools are there to be, to be used and leveraged for good or for evil. And I do, and I said, hey, so those of us who want to do good things with it need to really jump in and build tools and logarithms and things that went that way. Unfortunately, the other side, I think evil, or those who wanted to do harm and divide, became better practitioners, and somehow it's gone more the way you saw it, the real ugly way it could go. But do you have any thoughts about how to get it back on track, or is it this the only method is for us all to come together in these councils?
Well, let me just I think I've got a few thoughts, but let me push back again a bit about your word evil. I don't think the managers of McDonald's or KFC are evil. They're optimizers. And that's what you are too. When you're campaigning, you're trying to optimize votes. And if you're trying to optimize votes, you're trying to move down the brainstem. You're trying to get people's attention and so on.
I was talking more in the political terms of white supremacists, radical groups that understand how our minds work. I mean, what part of the mind they're trying to activate every day. And have used the technology or the social, et cetera, to just continually stoke that fear, the fight or flight, mechanism in our heads that may, that make it tough to deal rationally with today's problems. I mean, in other words, it's easier to stoke them up, and they've been doing that, and it's worked. I mean, look at where the country is, the world is right now.
Yeah, but when I was wondering about Pauline Hanson, our populist in Australia, I wasn't really thinking of the internet. That was 1990s. That was 1996.
Yeah, sure.
And I'll tell you what I was thinking about, because I've been dystopian about this for a long time. I think we would be not quite where we are, but somewhere near where we are without the internet, because it was in the logic of mass media. And the key stat for me is that between 1968 and 1988, the average length of a presidential soundbite on network news in the United States went from, and I'm now speaking from memory, but these numbers are basically right, 48 seconds to 9 seconds.
Yeah.
That's it. It's over. you're not going to have a civic discussion about what's good and bad about this policy, if it's whatever it is. You're going to have a sort of smash and grab. How do we get their attention, and so on. So that's sort of inherent in competitive democracy. And guess what? The representing the people by sampling, i.e., as we do in a jury, we just go and get some and we put them in a room.
Right.
That's not competitive democracy. So the logic of competition has over 200 years built itself into this system in a massively reductive way. And we have to live with that. We've got great things out of it, and now we're seeing some really serious downside.
Now you get to build that wall. Build
that
wall versus
build that wall. Lock her up. Build that wall. That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Which is, and there's no real discourse over real discussion about immigration. I mean, it's not build that wall. You might want to argue that in the group, and we can have a big discussion about it and come up with other ideas. But it's not that simple. And
so let me just make a point to rise to your challenge about what do you do online. Unfortunately, I don't think this is a particularly good response to your problem as a campaigner. But I think one of the great tragedies, it's a bit like the great tragedy of winning the Cold War and then sort of dusting off our hands and saying history is over and everything's fine. I think we have parts of our society, large parts of our society, that are not private sector and are not public sector. I'm thinking of things like universities. In a sense, even a large corporation is in the private sector and it's trying to make profits, but inside the corporation, it's a kind of socialist republic in a certain kind of way. And that means that those people running systems like that have an interest in developing the internet in a way that develops what I call the middleware of democracy, which is not just a shouting match where people just yell stuff at each other, but systems in which the people who make the best contributions start being promoted. That's why Wikipedia works. It's nice that it's open to anyone, but that's not the secret sauce. The secret sauce is that someone can live in that system and understand what is called the neutral point of view. It's a technical point where we can disagree whether George W. Bush was a good president or a bad president. We don't disagree about where he went to school and when he was born and so on. And in that system, we build a meritocracy in which people who are making a good contribution get more authority. And we have to try to build that in online. And let me give you an example, I think this is a very nice, simple example where someone ran a discussion site based in Australia. And what he did was he allowed you to aggregate the votes of people. He put up public issues, political issues. Should we do this? Should we do that? Should we cut tax? Should we introduce a UBI, a universal basic income, and so on? And people would debate various things. And then you could press a button and see how many people are on this side and how many people are on that side. You could then press another button to ask the algorithm to correct the voting and give more votes to people who the community felt were better contributors to the debate. Best way to illustrate that is you get more votes if you're one of the people who is well thought of by people who disagree with you. Okay, that's right. That. And so through a process like that and similar processes, you start to identify the contributors, the people who are trying to make sense and get somewhere rather than just scream at each other and come up with another way to demonize them and so on. That you can't send that into battle in your dire situation right now. But that's what we should have been working on for the last 20 years. While Sergey and Larry built Google and all these things, our universities, our corporations, our politicians should have been saying, let's get this going. Let's see if we can do something a bit better than that. But we haven't done it.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was on Fox News for 7 years, and I continually was seen as because I was trying to be civil and
Yeah,
have a real conversation,
yeah,
was seen repeatedly, even though I was a Democrat,
yeah,
as somebody that even when they disagreed with me, they rated me. They trusted the
yeah,
credibility of what I was
yeah.
saying,
That's right.
and to build that. But how do you do that? I mean, so just sort of again in bringing it down to what's happening now,
Yeah,
because I think you're right about all this, um, and I think it's essential for people to start thinking this way and thinking about it. But we're getting a lot of we started this. I told you about the union, jointheunion.us, where we're asking citizens to just only agree about one thing, disagree about other issues or anything else, but agree that defending and saving the democracy right now in terms of voting rights and voting, come together to defend any attacks against the democracy or against the right of people to vote, and join together to do that. And a lot of them are um, we're getting a lot of questions from these people about Facebook, and like we're discussing, the role technology is playing in our daily life right now. And it's I'm trying to get to how we. I get. I mean, I think Facebook's obviously taking a big hit, but as you say, that they're all Facebook and all these social media networks are all aimed at at inflaming both sides, right? I mean,
yeah,
getting engaged, keeping you engaged so that you keep clicking is what fuels them. And that's why I don't know how we
yeah,
take look at how they change uh their logarithm is encouraging this extremist
yeah,
behavior.
yeah.
And so I mean, what does it take to break out of that? I mean, that's obviously going to be a year problem, I think, or to
Yeah.
create this network you're talking about, where the best, the most people with gaining merit and support because they're trusted and they're known by users, even again if they don't agree with them, but they know they're fair and they can trust what their contribution has been. Is there anything like that being built right now that you're aware of, or are
Well, there
we
are
in the
lots of
lock of
people. Yeah,
are we
but
in the world of Facebook for the next
well, I think in terms, yeah, like, I mean, you could say this. I use the analogy of fast food a lot. And how can you get the McDonald's and the KFCs, the people who've really scaled, how do you get them to just behave a little better towards their customers? But that would mean making a bit less money, and they're not really very keen to do it. So, I mean, I think that's very hard, and I mean, I can tell you, I suppose, I can tell you what I think I'd do if you make me, you give me lots of political power, but no one's going to, and I might not, might not be wrong. I might not know how to do it, but the algorithm, think of the algorithms as public goods. These are things that dominate the way in which we build the most fundamental public good in our society, which is how we govern ourselves. So I think there should be, we should, the holy grail in some sense is to try to build these social utilities with that in mind. And I don't even mean in a very worthy way. I mean, my instinct would be to put ordinary people ultimately in charge of the algorithm, have complete transparency to them. And then you need to take those people and find the people, the ordinary people in that group who really excel, who really understand it, who really want to do more with it. And then you have to give them some sort of authority. It's pretty, anyway, it's certainly not, yeah.
It'd be like building one of your citizen groups around control of the of the
That's right.
logarithm, or at least impacting it and
That's right.
overseeing
That's right.
it and
Yeah.
shining light on it
Yeah.
if the company
That's right.
is crossing
That's
a
right.
line.
That's right. And I have a
That's
little term.
that's an interesting jury. That
Yeah,
I
it
think
is an
could
interesting.
be.
Yeah, yeah. And I have a term here which I'd like to introduce to you, which is the term. You know, Nassim Nicholas Taleb has anti-fragile, and my new term is decompetitive. So, what is a decompetitive mechanism? It is a mechanism that selects without competition. So, a lottery will do that, but so will a mechanism like is sometimes used in schools where you, well, let's say in a club or something, where you go round the members and you find out who's best regarded. This was used actually in a South Australian citizen jury where they had 340 members and they wanted to have spokespeople for the group. So what they did was they said they selected 15 people at random. They got them in a room. They asked them to spend 2 hours. First hour was to work out the criteria according to which one would choose a spokesperson. And the second hour was spent identifying people they'd met in the group who best met those criteria. No one's competing for anything. And who's going to win a competition like that? People who other people have noticed are contributors, who other people have noticed are not just in it for themselves, are not grandstanding, and so on and so forth. So those are mechanisms that we need. Those are mechanisms that we need to develop, and mechanisms that we have deplorably neglected for the last 200 years in the craze of the fast foodification of our society.
We could have,
guys, unless you want to get to anything else, we're right at or a little over time. So Joe, if you want to do one more response.
No, I was just going to say that a sitting member of Congress right now could get some independent organization to create a citizens jury in the district.
Absolutely.
And put 3 or 4 of the 5 problems that they're going to be facing and voting on in the next year. Yeah. And ask those citizens to make a recommendation. It wouldn't, it wouldn't be listening to your partisans or taking on the tribe you're opposed to. It's put groups of a lot of them in a room and tell them to work on these problems and make a recommendation to you. Could be an interesting start. There was a member of Congress out there, some of whom do listen to the podcast. So I'm just looking for ways to. I've always been enthralled with the idea and the notion, and I think we'd be much better off if we did learn to create some of these kind of mechanisms and get people talking face to face and together in groups again. I just don't. I tell you, as much as I've committed to that and wanted to believe it would be possible, I think the next 7, 8 months here in the States are going to be very partisan, very polarized. There are groups. I mean, there are 3% here or 4% there that are open to talking to the other side and don't immediately leap into the tribe. But they're so small a number, they're hard to find, actually.
Well, maybe after the midterms, maybe you and I should start talking about how we start to try and build that, because I think democracy will die if people won't defend that center of their being, which is that we are a species that lives in public goods, and we're speaking English. That's a public good. We came up with it. These are the media through which we live together, and without them, we're finished.
So, Nicholas, before we sign off, is there a place where people can find your work if we list it or link it, put links in our show notes?
So just come to I'm on Twitter, Ngruin. That's 6 letters, Ngruen, digit 1. They can DM me. I've got an open DM. You can look my name up on the internet and find a way to email me as well. So happy to hear from any and all people. And in fact, I was contacted by a person who was running for the. In fact, I want to talk to him to you about him offline, Joe. But he was thinking of running for the Ohio state legislature, but is now trying to get a citizen assembly going, and is
cool.
trying to develop a citizens initiated referendum to that effect. So it's bubbling up, and people are noticing. And America more than anywhere has got the problem, and America more than anywhere has got the energy and the traditions of solving of being first to create the problems and first to try and solve them. As Winston Churchill said, the Americans always do the right thing after they've exhausted all the alternatives. So I'm optimistic.
He said also that democracy was really flawed, messed up system, but it's the best form of government we've ever devised.
Yeah.
And he was right about that as well.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nicholas, for being with us this week. And thanks everybody for listening to That Trippi Show. We'll be back this Friday with another episode. Don't forget, please subscribe to That Trippi Show. Leave a review on Apple or wherever you listen. And please do share this episode with a friend. Again, we'll have links to how to find Nicholas in our show notes. You can always send us a question to thattrippishow@gmail.com or leave a question in a review on iTunes. See you next time. Thanks, Nicholas.
Nice, guys.
Cool.
Thank you. See, Alex, why I don't think you say much?
Yeah, he doesn't when we do an
great.
interview thing usually, unless I'm sort of like not asking good questions or he thinks.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I thought that went well.
Yeah, it went good. It went good. We'll get it in there. That's what I mean. I'm just trying to get people to start thinking, okay, we got this short-term fight, but
exactly.
I think if we went in,
so this guy, can I just put you in touch with this guy?
Yeah,
Lucas,
sure.
Lucas Blower is his name. Nice bloke.
Sure.
And it'd be interesting to get your thoughts.
Yep, absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Okay.
Stay tuned. We'll stay in touch this time.
Sounds
maybe we
good.
can get something going.
Okay, and there's something in the chat, so I better make sure that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've uploaded it already, have you?
Yeah, no, this is for Joe. This is just for Joe to upload.
Okay.
Yeah, I have to. Whoa. First, I gotta. Thanks for reminding me. I've got to save it and all that good stuff. So yeah, we got a little bit of house cleaning. We have to do here, Nicholas.
Okay.
But, thanks. It was great.
See you, Joe.
Cheers. Have a
See
good
you,
rest
Alex.
of your day.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks.